The gunshot echoed through the desolate plains as Rebecca Payton clutched her wailing infant closer to her chest, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild stallion. Winter in Wyoming Territory, 1878, showed no mercy to a widowed mother fleeing with nothing but the clothes on her back and a baby born just 3 weeks prior. Rebecca's breath fogged in the frigid air as she stumbled through knee-deep snow. Her husband's murder still burned fresh in her memory, shot down by cattle rustlers who'd taken everything but the child in her arms. The baby boy, wrapped in torn scraps of her petticoat, whimpered against her chest. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, her cracked lips barely moving in the biting cold. "We'll find shelter soon." The blizzard that had been threatening all day began to unleash its fury. Icy pellets stung Rebecca's face as she trudged forward, each step more difficult than the last. The abandoned mining town of Silver Creek lay somewhere ahead, if only she could reach it before nightfall. Her boots, never meant for this kind of journey, had worn through at the soles. Each step sent daggers of cold through her feet. The baby's cries grew weaker, a sound more terrifying than his wailing had been. Rebecca knew what it meant when babies stopped crying. "No, no, please," she begged, tears freezing against her cheeks. "Stay with me, my love." Through the swirling white, a shadow materialized, tall and imposing. Rebecca's first instinct was to run, but her legs refused to carry her any further. She collapsed to her knees, shielding her baby with her body. "Please," she rasped, "take whatever you want, but spare my child." "Madam," came a deep voice, gentle despite its gruffness, "I ain't here to hurt you." Rebecca raised her eyes to see a tall man dismounting from a sturdy chestnut horse. His face was partially obscured by a bandana pulled up against the cold, but kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he approached. "The name's Thomas Yates," he said, removing his gloved hand from his revolver to tip his hat. "Folks call me Timber Tom on account of my time in the logging camps up north." Rebecca clutched her baby tighter. "Rebecca Payton," she managed through chattering teeth. Thomas knelt beside her, his brow furrowing as he caught sight of the infant. "You can't be out here with a little one. Storm's only getting worse." "I have nowhere to go," Rebecca admitted, ashamed of the desperation in her voice. Thomas glanced at the horizon, then back at the woman and child. Without hesitation, he removed his heavy coat and draped it around Rebecca's shoulders. "My cabin's about 2 miles east," he said. "Can you ride?" Rebecca nodded weakly. With gentle hands, Thomas helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. He wrapped one arm securely around her waist while the other held the reins. The warmth of his body against her back was the first comfort Rebecca had felt in days. "Your baby," Thomas said as they rode through the worsening storm. "What's his name?" Rebecca looked down at the bundle. "James," she whispered. "After his father." The snow was falling so heavily now that Rebecca could barely see more than a few feet ahead. She trusted this stranger completely. She had no choice. The baby had gone quiet, and fear gripped her heart. "We're nearly there," Thomas assured her, sensing her distress. "Hold on." The cabin materialized like a mirage, a sturdy log structure with smoke curling from the stone chimney. Thomas dismounted quickly, helping Rebecca down before leading her inside. The warmth hit Rebecca like a physical force, bringing tears to her eyes. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the simple but tidy interior. "Let me see the little one," Thomas said, helping Rebecca to a chair near the fire. With trembling hands, she unwrapped the rags from around her baby. James was pale, his tiny lips tinged with blue. Rebecca let out a sob. Thomas quickly assessed the situation. "He's too cold, but he's breathing," he said with authority. "We need to warm him slowly." He moved with surprising efficiency for a man living alone in the wilderness, heating water and soaking cloths to place near but not directly on the infant's body. As he worked, Rebecca noticed calluses on his hands and a long scar running down his forearm. "You know about babies?" she asked, her voice small. Thomas's face darkened momentarily. "Had a younger brother I helped raise after our ma passed, and I've delivered my share of calves and foals. The principle ain't so different." Over the next hour, color gradually returned to little James's cheeks. When he finally let out a healthy cry, Rebecca wept with relief. "He's a fighter," Thomas said, a smile breaking across his weathered face. His bandana now removed, Rebecca could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark beard. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." "No need for that," Thomas replied, moving to prepare some food. Any decent man would do the same. Rebecca fed James while Thomas cooked a simple meal of beans and salt pork. As they ate, she reluctantly shared her story: her husband's murder, the rustlers who'd taken their cattle and horses, burning their small homestead to the ground. "I managed to escape with James and whatever I could carry," she concluded. "Been walking for 3 days. Thought we might reach Silver Creek." Thomas shook his head. "Silver Creek's a ghost town now. Mine dried up last spring." Rebecca's shoulders slumped. "I don't know where to go." "You'll stay here until the weather breaks," Thomas said firmly. "After that, we'll figure something out." That night, Rebecca slept in Thomas's bed while he took a bedroll near the fire. James, wrapped in clean flannel Thomas had produced from a trunk, slept better than he had in days. In the pale light of morning, Rebecca woke to find Thomas gently holding James by the fire, speaking to him in soft tones. "Your mama's been through a lot, little man," he was saying, "but you're safe now, both of you." Rebecca remained still, watching this gruff cowboy cradle her son with surprising tenderness. "You're awful tiny to have survived that blizzard," Thomas continued, unaware of Rebecca's waking. "Her baby slept wrapped in rags. But you'll grow strong in my arms, I promise you that. Maybe someday you'll even call me father." The simple declaration, spoken with such quiet conviction, brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. She must have made a sound, for Thomas looked up, his cheeks coloring slightly. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said, suddenly awkward. "He was fussing, and I thought you could use the sleep." "You're good with him," Rebecca observed, sitting up. Thomas glanced down at the baby. "He's easy to be good with." The blizzard raged for 3 more days, sealing them inside the cabin together. Rebecca learned that Thomas had been a Texas Ranger before coming north to Wyoming territory. He'd purchased this land 2 years ago, running a small herd of cattle and occasionally guiding hunting parties when they came through. "It's not much," he admitted as they shared coffee on the 3rd morning, "but it's peaceful." Rebecca found herself studying his face when he wasn't looking: the small scar near his temple, the crow's feet that deepened when he smiled, the way his dark hair curled at the nape of his neck. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. Sunlight streamed through the windows, revealing a world transformed into sparkling white. Thomas went out to check his livestock, returning with fresh milk from his 2 dairy cows. "Thought the little one might need this soon," he said, setting the pail down. "Figure his mama's been through enough that her milk might be running low." Rebecca blushed but nodded gratefully. "How did you know?" Thomas shrugged. "Seen it with animals. Stress affects everything." That afternoon, as Rebecca sat nursing James by the window, Thomas cleared his throat from across the room. "Been thinking," he said, turning his hat in his hands. "Silver Creek's empty, like I said, but Rimrock's about 30 miles south. Decent town, got a school and everything. I could take you there when you're ready." Rebecca felt a strange hollowness at the thought of leaving. "That's very kind." "Or," Thomas continued, his eyes fixed on his hat, "you could stay here, at least through winter. It's not much, but there's room. Come spring, if you wanted your own place, I could help you build something nearby." Rebecca studied him, this man who'd saved her life and her son's. "Why would you do that for us?" Thomas finally met her eyes. "Because you shouldn't have to face the world alone. Because your boy deserves a chance, and because—" He hesitated. "Because it's been a long time since this cabin felt like anything more than just walls and a roof." That night, after James was asleep in the cradle Thomas had quickly fashioned from a wooden crate, Rebecca joined him by the fire. "I'll stay," she said simply. "At least until spring." Thomas nodded, but Rebecca caught the smile he tried to hide behind his coffee cup. The weeks passed in a comfortable routine. Thomas taught Rebecca about caring for the livestock while she brought order to his bachelor existence. The cabin became more of a home: curtains fashioned from flour sacks, a rug braided from scraps of fabric, wildflowers pressed between pages of Thomas's few books to brighten the winter days. James thrived under their joint care. By February, he was smiling and cooing, his tiny hands reaching for Thomas whenever he came near. "He knows who saved him," Rebecca remarked one evening as Thomas rocked the baby to sleep. "We saved each other," Thomas replied softly. "Having you both here, it's given me purpose again." Rebecca wanted to ask what he meant, but held her tongue. Thomas rarely spoke of his past, though sometimes she caught him staring into the distance, his eyes haunted by memories he wouldn't share. One night, as a late winter storm howled outside, Thomas finally told her about the wife and unborn child he'd lost to fever 5 years earlier in Texas. "That's why I came north," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Couldn't bear to stay where every corner held a memory of Sarah." Rebecca reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I'm sorry. Been a long time since I allowed myself to care about anyone," he continued, his fingers tentatively turning to hold hers. "Was safer that way." "And now?" Rebecca asked, heart hammering. Thomas's eyes, reflecting the firelight, met hers. "Now I'm terrified, because if you and James leave come spring, I don't know how I'll bear it." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "Perhaps we won't leave." The tension between them grew in the following days, glances that lingered, fingers that brushed while passing a plate or cup. Rebecca found herself watching Thomas with James, the way his strong hands became gentle, the soft songs he hummed while rocking the baby to sleep. One evening in early March, Thomas returned from checking his cattle to find Rebecca sitting on the porch step, despite the lingering chill. "Everything all right?" he asked, concern etching his features. "Where's James?" "Sleeping," she replied. "I needed some air to think." Thomas sat beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. "Thinking about spring?" Rebecca nodded. "It will be here soon." "And you'll be wanting to move on," Thomas said, resignation heavy in his voice. "Is that what you think I want?" Rebecca turned to face him. Thomas stared at the horizon. "It's what most folks would want, a fresh start." "I had a fresh start the moment you found us in that snowstorm," Rebecca said quietly. "I'm not looking for another one." Thomas's breath caught. "Rebecca." "Unless you want us to leave," she continued, suddenly uncertain. In answer, Thomas reached for her hand, enfolding it in his own. "I want you to stay, both of you, I want." He paused, struggling for words. "I want to be a father to James, a husband to you if you'll have me." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," Thomas insisted. "I know you're strong and brave. I know you're a good mother. I know that when you smile, it feels like sunlight after the longest winter." He took a deep breath. "And I know that I've fallen in love with you." Rebecca hadn't expected those words, though perhaps she should have. The tenderness between them had been growing, unspoken but undeniable. "Thomas," she whispered, "are you certain? James and I come with complications. There may be men looking for us, the same ones who killed my husband." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Let them come. They'll find more than they bargained for." From inside the cabin, James began to cry. Rebecca rose, but Thomas caught her hand. "You don't have to answer now," he said. "Just promise you'll think about it." Rebecca leaned down impulsively, pressing a kiss to his weathered cheek. "I will." That night after James was settled, Rebecca found Thomas still on the porch, smoking a rare cigarette. "I've thought about it," she said, stepping outside. Thomas quickly stubbed out the cigarette. "That was fast." Rebecca smiled, moving to stand before him. "Some decisions don't require much thought. My heart already knows the answer." Thomas stood, closing the distance between them. "And what does your heart say?" In answer, Rebecca rose on tiptoes, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Thomas's arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him. When they finally parted, both breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" Rebecca nodded. "Yes, for James and for me." As spring arrived, transforming the landscape from white to green, Thomas and Rebecca were married by a traveling preacher who stopped at their farm. The ceremony was simple, just the two of them, baby James, and a few neighbors Thomas had invited from distant homesteads. "He'll grow strong in my arms and call me father." Thomas repeated his promise as he held James during the ceremony, the words now a formal vow rather than a whispered hope. Rebecca, wearing a dress she'd sewn from fabric Thomas had ridden 2 days to purchase, felt tears of joy track down her cheeks as she spoke her own vows. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Thomas expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and nursery. Rebecca planted a garden, and together they increased the cattle herd. James grew quickly, taking his first steps across the cabin floor as summer arrived. "Da-da," he called one evening, reaching for Thomas, who scooped him up with a whoop of joy. "Did you hear that, Rebecca? He called me da-da." Rebecca laughed at her husband's delight. "Of course he did. You're the only father he's ever known." Thomas's eyes grew serious as he held James close. "I'll make sure he knows about his real father someday, how brave James Payton was." "And he'll know how brave Thomas Yates is," Rebecca added, joining them in an embrace. "The man who saved us both." Summer brought prosperity. Their cattle fetched good prices, and Thomas's reputation as a fair businessman grew. Rebecca sold eggs and butter in Rimrock when they made the journey for supplies. Life was good, if simple, but shadows from the past loomed. In late August, Thomas returned from town with a grim expression. "There's word of rustlers working their way north," he told Rebecca that night after James was asleep. "The description matches what you told me about the men who killed your husband." Rebecca's hand flew to her throat. "Here, in Wyoming," Thomas nodded. "I've sent word to the sheriff in Rimrock. And I've asked some neighbors to keep watch." For weeks, they lived with heightened vigilance. Thomas taught Rebecca to shoot his spare revolver, though she prayed she'd never need to use it. The attack came on a crisp September morning. Rebecca was hanging laundry while James played in a pen Thomas had built near the clothesline. 3 riders appeared on the ridge overlooking their homestead. Rebecca snatched James up and ran for the house, where Thomas was cleaning his rifle. "Riders," she gasped. 3 of them. Thomas was on his feet instantly, peering through the window. "Take James to the root cellar. Lock the door from inside." "Thomas, now Rebecca," he said firmly, checking his ammunition. "I'll handle this." Rebecca descended into the cool darkness of the root cellar. James clutched tightly to her chest. Through the floorboards above, she could hear Thomas's boots on the porch, then his voice deceptively casual. "Morning, gentlemen. Something I can help you with." A voice Rebecca had hoped never to hear again replied. "Looking for a woman and child. Payton's her name. Word is she might be in these parts." "Can't say I know anyone by that name," Thomas replied evenly. "Plenty of homesteaders scattered around, though. Might try Rimrock." "We already did," the man said. "Interesting thing, several folks mentioned a woman with a baby who arrived last winter with a tall cowboy, said she married him in the spring." "That would be my wife," Thomas acknowledged. "Rebecca Yates, been married since April." "Rebecca, huh?" The man's voice dripped with suspicion. "Mind if we meet this wife of yours?" "She's not here," Thomas said. "Took our son to visit her sister in Laramie." The silence that followed was taut with tension. "You're lying," the man finally said. "Payton's widow is here, and so is the brat. They've got something that belongs to us." "Nothing here belongs to you," Thomas replied, his tone hardening. "I suggest you move on." Rebecca heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "We're not leaving without what's ours," the man growled. "Payton had a map to a gold cache. His widow took it when she ran." Rebecca's breath caught. James had mentioned a map the day he died, saying it was their future. She'd assumed he meant their homestead deed. "There's no map," Thomas said flatly. "Now get off my property before I forget my hospitality." The first gunshot made Rebecca jump, clasping James tighter as he began to wail. More shots followed, the sound of breaking glass, a cry of pain that might have been Thomas. Rebecca fumbled for the revolver Thomas had insisted she keep in the root cellar. With trembling hands, she checked that it was loaded, then placed James in the furthest corner behind a stack of preserved food. "Stay quiet, my love," she whispered, though she knew the baby couldn't understand. The root cellar door flew open with a crash. Rebecca raised the revolver, finger poised on the trigger. "Rebecca, it's me," Thomas called down. Blood streaked his face from a gash above his eyebrow, but he was alive and standing. "Thomas," she cried, lowering the gun. "Are you?" "I'm fine," he assured her, helping her up the ladder. "2 of them are dead. The 3rd ran off, but he won't get far. Sheriff's men were already on their way here. They should catch him before he reaches the pass." Rebecca sagged against him in relief before pulling back to examine his wound. "You're hurt." "Just a graze," Thomas said, wincing as she touched near the cut. Bullet hit the window frame and sent splinters flying. Rebecca retrieved James, who had subsided to hiccuping sobs, and held him close. Outside, she could see two bodies lying in the yard. She turned away quickly. "They said something about a map," Thomas said quietly. "Did James ever mention anything like that to you?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "The day he died, he said he'd found our future. I thought he meant our homestead deed, but—" She paused. "There was an old Bible of his father's. James kept it in a metal box under our bed. I grabbed it when I fled. It's in my trunk." Together, they opened the Bible to find a carefully folded map tucked between its pages. Faded ink showed what appeared to be a canyon with an X marked near a distinctive rock formation. "It's real," Thomas breathed. "A gold cache." Rebecca stared at the map, then at her husband's face. "Does it matter? We have everything we need right here." Thomas studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "You're right." He folded the map and handed it back to her. "But it's yours by right. Your husband died for it. Someday it might provide for James's future." Rebecca tucked the map back into the Bible. "Our son's future is already secured through your love and hard work." Thomas pulled her and James into an embrace. "Our son," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. The sheriff and his deputies arrived an hour later, confirming they'd captured the third rustler. The bodies were removed, statements taken. When they left, Thomas and Rebecca stood on their porch, watching the sunset paint the horizon in gold and crimson. "We're safe now," Thomas said, his arm around Rebecca's waist. "Those men can't hurt you anymore." Rebecca leaned into his embrace. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after James died. I was just trying to survive for our son's sake." "And now?" Thomas asked softly. "Now I know that surviving and living are different things," she replied, turning to face him. "You taught me how to live again, Thomas Yates." Thomas kissed her gently, then more deeply as James dozed in his cradle nearby. When they parted, his eyes held a question. "What is it?" Rebecca asked. "I was thinking," he said hesitantly. "Maybe James could use a brother or sister someday." Rebecca smiled, taking his hand and placing it over her stomach. "Someday might be sooner than you think." Thomas's eyes widened. "Are you?" Rebecca nodded. "I've suspected for a few weeks now. After today, I'm certain." Joy transformed Thomas's face as he knelt before her, pressing his lips to her still flat belly. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I promise you'll never sleep wrapped in rags. You'll grow strong like your brother, surrounded by love." 5 years later, the Yates Ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. The cabin had grown into a proper house with a wide porch where Rebecca sat in a rocking chair, watching Thomas teach 6-year-old James and 4-year-old Emily to ride their ponies in the corral. "Not too fast, James." Rebecca called. "Remember, your sister is still learning." James, the spitting image of his birth father but with Thomas's mannerisms, slowed his pony obediently. "Yes, Mama." Emily, with Rebecca's auburn curls and Thomas's dark eyes, giggled as her pony trotted in a circle. "Look, Papa. I'm doing it." "That's my girl," Thomas called proudly. Rebecca's hand rested on her swollen belly, where their third child kicked vigorously. The map had remained in the Bible, untouched for years until last spring, when Thomas suggested they might use a portion of the gold if it existed to build a school for the growing community around them. The cache had been real, though smaller than legends suggested. Still, it was enough to fund the schoolhouse that now stood a mile down the road, serving a dozen families who had settled nearby. As the sun began to set, Thomas helped the children from their ponies and led them to the house, his face alight with the simple joy of fatherhood. "You're a natural father," Rebecca said as he joined her on the porch, the children racing inside to wash for dinner. Thomas took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Only because you gave me the chance to be one." Rebecca smiled, remembering the desperate woman who had stumbled through a blizzard with a baby wrapped in rags. That woman seemed like a stranger now, as distant as the fears that had once consumed her. "I think we gave each other what we needed," she said, leaning into his embrace as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. Thomas nodded, his arms tightening around her. "A second chance." "No," Rebecca corrected gently. "A first chance at the life we were always meant to find." As darkness settled over the Wyoming plains, The lights of their home glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of the love that had begun on a desperate winter day, when a cowboy had promised a tiny baby wrapped in rags that he would grow strong in his arms and call him father. A promise that had been kept and would continue to be kept for all the days to come.